I'm Susan Mariyama, Chair of Livable Raleigh. I would like to welcome you this evening to Livable Raleigh's second Community Conversation event of 2022. The program tonight is about community engagement. What does success look like? Okay. Livable Raleigh takes pride in modeling excellent community engagement. So let me take a few moments here to let you know how you can participate tonight. Okay. Is everybody muted? That'll make it a little easier for all of us. Okay, thank you. After our guest speaker's presentation, we will have a question and answer session. You can ask questions in a variety of ways. Number one, you can use the raise hand icon in the Zoom dashboard, and we will do our best to recognize you in the order in which you have raised your hand. Or if you would prefer, type the word stack, S-T-A-C-K, in chat, and you will be recognized to speak when it's your turn. Or you can type your question in chat, and these questions will be forwarded to our host, and we will make sure that they are asked during the course of the evening. There have been some questions submitted this past week to Livable Raleigh's email address for tonight's meeting. We will be sure to include these questions as well throughout the evening. A couple of housekeeping matters. All microphones will remain muted until you are called upon to speak. This meeting is being recorded. Now I would like to introduce you to your host for this evening, Mike Lindsay. Mike is chair of the Hillsborough Wade Citizens Advisory Council, known as the CAC. Mike is also a member of the Livable Raleigh Advisory Committee. He has lived in Cameron Park neighborhood since 1984. He is active in neighborhood issues and city politics. It is a pleasure to turn this program over to Mike. Take it away, Mike.
Thanks, Susan. Welcome everybody to this evening's program. And I want to tell you a little bit about our special guest tonight, Tahisha Hinton. She was born and raised in Raleigh and attended Wake County Public Schools. She has a BA in Business Management from North Carolina A&T State University. She received a Master of Science Social Administration from Case Western Reserve University. Ms. Hinton began her career as a community organizer for Slavic Village Community Development Corporation in Cleveland, Ohio, before serving the city of Durham as a housing research consultant. After that, she worked with the city of Winston-Salem for 6.5 years in a variety of roles, including Minority and Women-Owned Business Coordinator, Assistant Director of Business Inclusion and Advancement, Director of Sanitation, and Director of the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. As many of you know, this past September, the City of Raleigh announced that Tahisha would lead the newly formed Office of Community Engagement. She was selected following a competitive national search, which included nearly 300 candidates. Ms. Hinton is a member of the National Association of Social Workers, the International City Management Association, and she has participated in the Leadership Winston-Salem Flagship Program, the UNC School of Government, Municipal and County Administration, and the UNC School of Government Community Development Academy. Very impressive. And before I turn the program over to Tahisha, I'd like to tell you one fun fact about her. Her first job was working at the Cold Stone Creamery in Raleigh when she was 15 years old. So, with all those incredible things about her past, let's see what she has to tell us tonight. So take it away, Tahisha.
Thank you so much, Mike. I will say that you promised to keep that intro short, and you read everything. But
I know I left out a few things out of your resume.
Oh goodness, thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. I am going to share my screen, and just a reminder, while my screen is shared, I can't see everything in the chat, but the good folks with Livable Raleigh will make sure I'm caught up there. And I did see something that said go Spartans. So there's another Case graduate on the call somewhere. And if there are any Aggies on the call, Aggie Pride. So give me one moment to share my screen and we will get started. Is it sharing?
Yes, yes, it is. You need full screen.
You're shared. There you go. There you go.
There we are. So let me get started here. Again, Taisha Hinton, thank you so much for taking the time to join us this evening to talk about community engagement in the city of Raleigh. I'll give you an overview of what I will be discussing this evening. I'm going to start with talking about the scope with the Office of Community Engagement. I will follow that by defining when we say community engagement, what we mean by it. As I'm sure many of you know, there are different interpretations, expectations, or understanding of community engagement. So we'll spend some time there. I will then briefly go through the goals for our office. That's what we presented to City Council a few months ago at their retreat. I'll talk about some of our current initiatives, the work that we've completed, work that's currently in the process, and then some things that are coming down the pipeline, if you will. If you watched the council meeting on yesterday, you will see the same slides pertaining to the Community Engagement Board, which is brand new, and I'll spend a significant amount of time there. And the purpose of our office is leading people-focused processes, and you'll hear the word process a lot in this presentation tonight, that increase the collective capacity of the residents who live, work, and play here. So the Office of Community Engagement, what in the world does that mean? We are speaking to any process that involves seeking the input, requesting the input of community members and how the city arrives at decisions and solves problems. Our office will also work to take that a step further in making sure that that engagement is meaningful. So using the input from the community to make sustainable decisions, working with city staff to make sure that when we are requesting input or feedback from the community, that we do so at a time that's clear and appropriate. We will also work with city departments and the community to find ways to make sure that that input is representation of the whole and not just some. And then making that an open two-way dialogue. Both public outreach and community engagement are extremely important to me as an individual, to me as a professional, and as a social worker, and I'm sure the same for you all. And I just want to make the distinction here when we talk about public outreach versus community engagement. So public outreach being something that allows you to receive information. So if I'm saying, finding a name, hey, Steve, I'm having a bake sale on Friday at 5 o'clock. It's at my house, come over, right? That's just me sharing information. I'm doing outreach. I'm telling Steve about something that I have going on. Versus community engagement, allowing someone to participate. So instead of telling Steve that I'm having a bake sale, what time I'm having it, and the type of cookies that I plan to have, I'll say, Steve, you think we should do it on Friday or Saturday? Should we have a bake sale at all? And what do we do about the people that are gluten-free? Because I know nothing about gluten-free chocolate chip cookies, right? And we have a conversation and we develop a plan as to how to arrive to that bake sale. That's a very simplified example, but I do want to make the distinction there between when something is just providing outreach and information versus encouraging people to actively participate in a process. And there are some examples there on the slide. Another slide here, just outreach typically I mean, there's a little bit of gray area here, but typically being something that's short-term, transactional. What can A do for B? Would you come to my bake sale and buy my cookies? Or something that's more long-term, relationship building. Let's find a way to have this bake sale together. So I hope that makes sense. And I just want to hone in on the fact that we are talking about the engagement side of this, but the outreach portion of it is critical as well. The office's responsibilities. We have a lot of responsibilities, but I am going to highlight the big two. One, advancing the city's goal of improving and reimagining our community engagement efforts. And two, helping to encourage active participation, again, in that decision-making dialogue and public policy. And I'm going to break those down a little bit more to just kind of highlight our scope. So advancing, I talked on the previous slide about advancing the city's goal of improving, reimagining community engagement efforts. What does that look like? That's partnering with community groups such as yours to seek and operationalize feedback. That includes identifying policies and processes that work well or those that don't, and operationalizing that feedback, obtaining that feedback to do something about the processes or policies that do not. Our community engagement board, which we'll talk about more later, and then implementing strategic engagement efforts. And so for our office, that's outlining the process to involve the public in said processes and decision-making, and then making sure that we're consistent and transparent in how we document the results of outreach activities that are conducted. That second goal that was on the previous slide was helping to, responsibility, excuse me, was helping to encourage active participation in decision-making and public policy. That's developing meaning relationships with community groups, establishing processes that not only are effective, but also equitable in nature. Also, having clear messaging that explains the why. Why should someone participate? Why should someone care about what it is that you're trying to get information about? Why should someone spend time on a Wednesday evening at 7:00 p.m. to listen to Taisha talk about her job, right? Those are the things that we're talking about. Improved information sharing, public outreach, and then we're also responsible for educating the public on city services, initiatives, and then of course, input opportunities. So with all that being said, it's just important that we talk about what's within the scope of this office. That's developing a comprehensive community engagement plan that we will work with the community and with the community engagement board to create and implement. That also within our scope is identifying emerging community engagement strategies and technologies and utilizing that, dispersing that throughout the organization itself. So that's all City of Raleigh departments. Also within our scope is advising and supporting city departments and their community engagement efforts. So very frequently city departments reach out to us at different parts in their processes to seek feedback, to get input. Sometimes, the city employees work very hard, and I'm grateful for them, but we give very honest feedback. When it's great, it's great. And when it's not, it's not. And so far, most departments have been extremely accepting of our feedback, and we've co-collaborated to put things in place that work. And then also within our scope is promoting enhanced engagement practices across the organization. And when I say organization, I'm referring to the City of Raleigh. So the City of Raleigh departments and responsibilities. This slide here for those that don't know, is the organization's, the City of Raleigh's organizational chart. And there's something at the top, so I can't see, forgive me. And so at the very top is City Council. We are a council manager form of government. So what that means is that the residents of this great city elect council members. The council members then appoint those, they hire those three positions at the top. That's the city attorney, the city manager, and the city clerk. And then the city manager hires everyone here in the green boxes and the folks below. So we take our direction. The city council gives their direction to the city manager. The city manager relies on staff to execute that vision. And so the Office of Community Engagement is here. We report directly to an assistant city manager. We're actually a part of the city manager's office. Our assistant city manager is Evan Raleigh. And yes, his last name is Raleigh. It's not from Raleigh, but that's his last name. So that's how we're set up there. Our office was established formally July of last year. I started in September of 2021, and my colleague Ellen began in January of this year. So we are a team of 2 currently. All right, the goals of our office. We have 4 goals, and I'm going to go through these relatively quickly, just from a high level view, because we have a lot to cover. Our first goal is making it easier, for community members to obtain information and participate in city-sponsored initiatives. We plan to do that, 1, by securing a mobile strategy that meets people where they are to deliver resources, information, and tools. I'll talk more about that later. Our second objective under this goal is to establish the Community Engagement Board, which will include residents of Raleigh to help guide organizational engagement efforts. We'll also discuss that more later on. And then the third objective here is to highlight opportunities for education and awareness of city services and programs. Our second goal is to engage our engagement processes. That includes incorporating public engagement plans and our city communication briefs and department plans. What that looks like is before an initiative, event, an outreach opportunity or engagement opportunity is created, the department has a plan that they follow that outlines those steps so that they're intentional and strategic about their engagement efforts. We will also be working to develop both an internal and external process that essentially takes the feedback or the recommendations about different events or initiatives in the city, and we find a way to operationalize the feedback that's received. And then lastly, under this goal is closing the loop by communicating the results of our engagement activities and project results in a way that's easy to find, easy to understand, easy to be referred to, and so on and so on. Our third goal is building staff capacity. So staff being City of Raleigh employees. We will work to create a toolkit, which will supplement a document called the Public Participation Playbook that was created a couple of years ago around engaging communities. We'll also work to utilize the city's internal internet or website to provide terms and best practices, example surveys and resources to city employees. You may not think about it often, but every city department, and definitely not all city employees, are in the world of engagement. They're subject matter experts in other things like engineering or water, and they want to engage and they want to do things in an equitable way, but just need some support in when and where to get started and how to do things in a way that work. And then our last goal, excuse me, 90% over daycare germs, so forgive me. The fourth goal is obtaining consistent baseline data about the diversity of the participation in our city-sponsored events. This is important because we need to know who's participating and who's not participating in order to have strategic efforts to reach communities or areas that we're not reaching. So we want to establish standardized demographic data that we'll utilize. So some city departments may ask, about ethnicity, others may not. So we're standardizing that demographic data to help us tell the bigger picture to align with these strategic engagement efforts in the future. Some of our current initiatives. We've had well over 45 to 50 meetings with community groups to just introduce ourselves, learn about who's in the community, the type of work they're doing, where there's synergy, where there's opportunity to collaborate. We've had about 25 to 30 department consultations. So again, that's departments coming to us as kind of like an internal consultant to seek feedback and guidance on the work that they're doing or planning to do. We recently held our Vote Local Raleigh, the local government mini-series, which I'll talk about. I think it's on the next slide or this slide thereafter. Another cool thing we did was with Raleigh Police Department. We held the police department was looking to or considering to create a policy around the U visa. And so we brought individuals and groups in from the Hispanic and Latino community to have conversation with RPD about the pros, the cons. So that we held that about a month ago. Publishing our partners, I'll talk about a little bit later, as well as the community engagement board, the rezoning process enhancements. We're very involved, those will come later. We're very involved in the organization's strategic plan. So that guides the work of the organization, and you'll see community engagement throughout that strategic plan many times. And so we're on all of those strategic planning teams. And then that engagement vehicle, which is on a couple of slides ahead. So the Vote Local Raleigh initiative was one of the recommendations that came from a study group. They directed council or recommended that council direct staff to establish a voter education initiative. So this is a result of that. Phase one was us explaining the impact of decisions made at the local level. We partnered with Raleigh Neighborhood College and held 3 mini government series on April 12th, 19th, and 26th. We talked about local government basics. We talked about the city's budget from a high level, where money is going, how that works, and we talked about stormwater services. Phase 2 will begin in June, which is going to be a lot of information sharing, public outreach, a dedicated voter information page on the city website, in-person events, tabling with some partners, and social media. So more on that to come. The engagement vehicle was recently approved by City Council. And again, the goal here is to meet people where they are and create the opportunity to connect while also bringing information. We are really excited. We've begun establishing the list of partners service partners that will join us on with our engagement vehicle. It will be electric. It's going to have about 3 computers, if I remember correctly, and 2 printers, I believe. And the possibilities here are truly endless. Some are listed there. While our office is housing the vehicle, if you will, it will also be utilized by other city departments. Like if you think about some of the more external facing departments like police or fire or solid waste services, they get in their vehicles all the time and they see the direct impact of their work. And so we want to extend that to internal facing departments as well, again, with the goal of meeting people where they are, building relationships and recognizing that everyone doesn't have time to come downtown. Everyone doesn't have an interest in coming downtown, or they don't have the transportation or the capacity, or there are tons of reasons why. So as an organization, we have to be intentional about meeting people where they are and making sure that they have access to information and resources. Thank you for being with me and my sips of water in between. So when I first started in my role, a part of those community, introductory community meetings that I had was with a lot of the familiar faces that are on this call, as well as countless other community advocates, community groups, organizations. And something that was consistent in those conversations was exploring our rezoning process, what can be enhanced, what can be changed. I won't spend a lot of time here, but what I did do was take all of the feedback and all of those conversations and establish ways for us to enhance the process or better establish the process in a way that's more equitable. So one of the complaints or concerns that we heard a lot was that depending on the project or depending on who the developer is, that the way information is presented or the type of information that's presented, it varies from neighborhood to neighborhood. And some people live in areas that have been involved in rezoning processes for decades and others don't. And so our response to that was creating a set of frequently asked questions that includes defined terms and standard conditions, in the hopes that somebody walking into a community meeting for the very first time has at least a place to start with all of the acronyms and terms that are thrown out at community meetings. Something else that we are looking at and in the process of establishing a pilot program for is utilizing volunteers at community meetings who would be trained and would assist in community building. So that's someone that's not a representative of the developer, not a city employee, but your neighbor. The Planning and Development Department kicked off their applications for the first Planning Academy for the city of Raleigh. I believe that's set to start in June. And this is around our additional education efforts. If you search Planning Academy on the city's website, it'll come up. And if you're not interested in searching the city's website, my contact information will be at the end and I can get the information to you. The Raleigh Neighborhood College talks about rezoning, and then we are looking at developing some type of educational video that gives a high-level overview of that process, again, to just help our education efforts around this particular topic or of land use. And then back to that first point, we want to make sure that all community meetings are structured the same, that irregardless of whether you're on the north side or the south side, that the information that is being presented is done so consistently and in a standardized way. So developing some baseline expectations for community meetings. Excuse me. And then lastly, but not least, is creating some better connection to project specific information. So when you see a sign on the road or information somewhere, that it takes you directly to the information that you're looking for versus several clicks to get there. This slide just kind of shows you what's been completed by our office, what is in progress, some of our short-term work initiatives and some of the longer-term ones. I talked about a lot of these, but when I first started, we conducted 5 listening sessions around city council terms and compensation. We've discussed the community and department meetings. We talked about U-Visa. All right, so that's the completed stuff. The items in progress we've touched on as well. I will expand upon the updated website where actually just had a meeting today. We're finalizing a page on the community engagement website where there is essentially a hub that contains any opportunity to provide feedback or input, whether that be online or in person. So we want to have all that stuff in one place. And so we're working on that. Some of the short-term goals are what you saw on the previous slide with the rezoning process enhancements, et cetera. And then something in the longer term that I'm really excited about right now, it's being called Publish Our Partners, but I'm sure the good folks in communication would give me a better name than that. The goal of Publishing Our Partners is to develop a place where any community group or organization and the focus of their work or the type of services that they provide is on the city's website with contact information for a couple of reasons. One, so that city departments who mean well, but don't always know who's out there, who's interested, who they can contact besides the same groups that they may be aware of. So that's one use of it. It'll also give the opportunity for new organizations, nonprofits, whether they're service-based or not, to be able to partner with the city and share their information. And we hope to have that done in a way that's like by topic. So if it's like organizations around youth services or organizations around health and human service, whatever the case may be, we want to have all the information in one place in a way that's easy to understand, see it by geographic location, see it by category. So it's a lot of work going into it, but we're really excited to see that come to fruition. All right, the Community Engagement Board. So again, I'm going to share with you the information that was presented to City Council on yesterday. The board in itself will have two phases. The first phase includes council appointments, and then it also includes community representatives. I'll talk more about what that looks like. The second phase of the board will have the addition of committees, which are going to be dedicated to strategic engagement efforts around different focus areas. And that is has so much potential and opportunity there. And we're hoping that once the board is established, I plan to allow them to decide what those focus areas are. So whether they want to focus on city policies, or a committee wants to focus on engaging renters or engaging youth, or how we can enhance a specific type of process. So the committees, it may be 4, it may be 6. We're leaving that open so that once the board is established, that's something that they can brainstorm and create and co-develop in that regard. And so phase 2, we're aiming for early to mid 2023. The responsibilities of the Community Engagement Board are as follows: reviewing the existing policies within the city around community engagement, the policies, practices, and procedures, and then providing recommendations for how to improve them. The board will also be responsible for elevating the voices and needs of communities that have been historically marginalized or underrepresented within government decision-making processes. They'll also be responsible for advising and assisting the city in connection with the development and implementation of our efforts and strategies, as well as assisting with public outreach to community members, convening stakeholders, etc. The vision for the Community Engagement Board. We want this body of volunteers, Raleigh residents, to be individuals who aspire to assist the city of Raleigh, the Office of Community Engagement, in improving not only in our overall community engagement efforts, but also how we're obtaining input, how we're utilizing it, who we're obtaining it from, and what we're doing with it. We're also looking for board members who are able to provide culturally sensitive, and that's important, tangible and innovative approaches to community engagement efforts, someone who wants to empower community-driven solutions and value the importance and the critical aspect of storytelling and information sharing. And we really need board members who can ask honest questions about themselves and their own privileges, about structures and their imperfections in communities as well. Amplifying lived experiences is important because what the truth is that individuals from communities that have been there for generations see things that people that are not from those communities or new to those communities, no matter how well-intending they may be, do not see. And community members who have that firsthand experience need to be prioritized, need to be valued in all of these processes and policies that I've talked about. Those lived experiences of people are just as important, just as essential as a consultant that you may go into a contract with to tell you something. But and really, I wouldn't say just as important, but more important than that, because they are the indicator of expertise and community members are the expert to solutions. So the composition of the board, it'll be 16 individuals, 8 community representatives will be selected by the Office of Community Engagement from the pool of submitted forms. And then the other 8 will be selected by members of City Council and Mayor. Each of the district city councilors will appoint a community member from their district. And then the mayor and at large will appoint community members from citywide. And so I've heard different things here, and this is just what I will say in all honesty. The value here in this, while it may not be the preference of some, it's truly at large or by large different from most of the other boards and commissions. It provides the opportunity for individuals with different types of social capital or individuals with different type of experience to serve on a board or commission. It typically all council members vote and on individual people to serve on a board for the entire board. And this is more of a compromise here. The community representatives that we are seeking are as follows. We are looking for a resident that has lived in Raleigh city limits for most of their life, someone that moved to Raleigh within the past 2 to 3 years. We want a BIPOC, that stands for Black, Indigenous, or Person of Color business owner. We're also looking for someone who has not previously served on the City of Raleigh Board or Commission. We're going to be seeking out someone who currently rents housing within the City of Raleigh as their only and primary residence. So not someone who owns a home and rents out properties, but someone who is a true and authentic renter. Someone between the ages of 18 to 23. Someone who is 65 years of age or older. And then we'll be looking for a resident with lived or professional experience, educating, advocating for community needs and underinvested groups. And the other half of the board that's selected by the mayor and council, we've asked mayor and council to seek individuals solution-oriented, passionate about community engagement. And again, I'll say it again, willing to ask the tough questions. We have to be real honest. Community engagement is polarized and complex. And we need people that can ask those questions, but also be open and willing to work towards solutions. So I can tell you all the problems, sure, but I also need to be able to tell you about ideas and solutions instead of just accepting the status quo. The process at a very high level will be the submission of an interest form, and I'm going to tell you how to do that in a moment. Those will be reviewed. Individuals based on the criteria that you saw on the previous slides will be selected. We will be asking individuals to submit an affidavit of sorts that just says, it is true that I have lived in Raleigh for half my life, things like that. So, you know, we're crossing our T's and dotting our I's in that regard. we will create a memo that will list all 16 members that we're nominating, and then it will go to council for the final approval for the final appointment. Residency and terms, we're asking that individuals be a resident of the city of Raleigh, and like most other boards or commissions, there'll be 2-year terms. Public outreach will actually start it today by way of community centers. I'll talk more about that in a moment. Emails, physical flyers that our communications department worked with us to create. City of Raleigh website, so the page is up now. Working with community partners to help spread the word and ask individuals to apply, especially those community representative and those specific diverse types of people that we're looking for. And then we'll be releasing a video soon on Raleigh Television Network. That's what RTN stands for, and I should have spelled that out. My apologies. The actual interest forms for this board will not be available until May 23rd, and that's intentional because we want to take this 2.5 weeks to really educate people and have conversations about the board, answer any questions so that people just aren't applying kind of with a blind eye to the work that's going to be required. Our in-person locations where individuals can literally go pick up, fill out, and drop off those interest forms are at these 6 community centers. So they will have them available on May 23rd. That's Barwell Road, Peach Road, 5 Points, John Chavis, Tarboro Road, and Abbott's Creek Community Centers. And then again, May 23rd is when the forms become available. They close on June 10th. So from May 23rd to June 10th is the window of time to apply. And anyone can call the number on this screen to request it by mail. There's always opportunity to complete it on the city's website. And then if you have questions, you can email community engagement at raleighnc.gov. So yesterday it went to council for approval. We began an outreach today. May 17th, an ordinance has to be adopted, and that's just a fancy way of formally establishing the board. Again, interest forms will be available on May 23rd. They will close on June 10th. And it is our plan to announce the inaugural Community Engagement Board on July 5th. And then we are aiming to have their first meeting in September of 2022. And what does success look like for the Office of Community Engagement? It's when we have community engagement processes, practices throughout the entire organization, throughout the city of Raleigh, that not only incorporate, but also value the diversity of need and the diverse interests of Raleigh residents. You know, different neighborhoods need different things. It is not a one size fits all, and we have to be flexible in the approaches that we take to get that done. Success also looks like increased outreach and input from underrepresented and underinvested communities, continued relationship building as well. And the contact information, our general email, again, is communityengagement@raleighnc.gov. Our fabulous team of 2, myself and Ellen, our contact information is on the screen, and I will also try to put that in the chat for you as well. So with that, I'm going to take a sip of water and turn it back over to you, Mike.
Thanks, Tisha. Okay, we're going to start the Q&A part of this. And just to remind everybody, Susan introduced this, you know, raise your hand using the icon if you want to ask a question. We've already got questions in the chat. Some people have entered the term stack. Also be mindful of people's times tonight. Try to keep your questions to the essential part, and please don't go on a monologue if you can avoid that, and be respectful of our guests and everybody else. The first question, and I don't know what it is, but it was from Wanda Hunter. She used that term stack. So Wanda, if you have a question.
Actually, I was using it as an example when Susan was giving the instructions.
Oh, okay, okay. I believe, let's see here. It's Joshua. I'm scrolling down, I'm not seeing it. Yeah, Joshua Bradley.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
A couple of things. First, Ms. Hinton, I appreciate that you've put a lot of work into this, and I don't want to think that we don't think that's the case. I've got a couple of questions though. First of all, the community engagement board is truly represented, should have people that are currently experiencing or have experienced long-term houselessness, and people that have served time and have been released back into the community. Are there plans to have people like that to be on the board, to be truly representative of a larger section of the community?
There's definitely not opposition to it. Once we talked about though the committees that are established, and we're talking about getting the board in place and letting them decide where to take it next. So there's not opposition to it, no.
But shouldn't they be on the board?
Sure.
Like
Go
if
ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean, if you're creating a board before you get into the committees and you want the board to be representative, then I would think that somebody on the board you would have actual board members with some authority, being people that have experienced, time served or currently or have experienced, houselessness. And it's just a lot of times city boards, they'll have this, we're going to reach out to certain segments of the population, but automatically eliminate and filter out people that have had, been on hard times before. And if with a successful community engagement, I would strongly recommend you find people from both of those groups. Because they are definitely valued members of the community as well, and they are more often than not put out.
Yeah, Josh, Bradley, I definitely agree with you respective to those two groups. And I'll be the first to say there are other types of individuals that can and should be represented as well. So this is just a start to the work, and this is to get us going, but I hear you and your point's well taken.
Okay. And the second thing that I wanted to say right quick is that, so we're going to have a 16-member board that's going to replace like community, like the citizen advisory councils. Is there a point at some point where they're going to decide that actually having community meetings in people's neighborhoods are probably a good idea, and then we'll eventually get back to representing a larger swath of the community with stuff in place that ensures equity and that kind of stuff? Over.
If I understand your question and comment correctly, the focus of the board is not to recreate or replace. I think is the word that you use. But as far as where their meetings would be held, I'm not opposed to that. I just can't speak to that at this time because they're not here yet.
Okay. We've got Donna Bailey has a hand raised. We'll take some raised hands next.
Hi, Donna.
Taisha, thank you for doing this. I sat in all of the meetings from the previous community engagement task force. I was also a member of the external task force that Mickey Fern put together, and he had a great idea. One of the things was, using the 28 community centers. A lot of the things you're talking about are things the CACs were already doing. We had bylaws, we had a standardized process for hearing rezonings. That is when we really saw population come. We had meetings sometimes, I think up in the Northeast, they had a CAC meeting with 650 people. Our general CAC meetings were generally about 40, 45 people, but when we had a rezoning, people were very interested in what was going on, and they knew they could come, and that is when they heard from the developer, from the city staff, and that there was a neutral person there who understood the rezoning process. And I'll give you an example. Just last week, I went to a rezoning meeting. There were over 100 people there. This was in the Mordecai neighborhood. This was the developers meeting. To have just the developer lead a meeting is really a waste of time because they're telling you what they want you to hear. Some developers are more transparent and open than others, but at least at the CAC meetings, we had people there that could openly ask questions and understood the process, you know, because not even the city staff person that's there, they could answer some questions, but they couldn't answer all. So it seems like there was already a really good model, and a lot of things you're talking about, this would still be a good model. I feel that some of the CACs, they were not the right balance as far as population. And that's where I think Mickey Fern's idea of using the 28 instead of 18 where we had before, we could, and to get a more equitable balance in population. I think that would be, you know, and that is, we gave a lot of information about what was going on with the city, and we had a lot of people came from the city. In fact, when the CACs were disbanded, some of the city people said, wow, where are we going to go now for community engagement? And different people came for different things, but it seems like, you know, community engagement is like a pie, and having something like the CACs, the most important thing about CACs is that they were citizen-led and citizen-elected. If you try and get true community engagement with appointed people, that is going to be a failure before you even start. Because as we have seen with this council, when they appoint people, it is just a reflection of who they are and who their supporters are. And that is not true community engagement. So I hope that in all of this, and I know you have pressure from above to not have CACs, but they were open to everyone. No one was ever denied participation at a CAC. So I really hope you can try and get something back like that, but even better, and especially with you there, to get some real community support, because we had very little community support as the CACs.
Donna, do you mean community or city support?
City support.
Okay.
Yes, we had very little. We got $1,000 a year, and we got a person, you know, that came to the meeting, and they sent out to our email list, but that's about all they did.
Okay.
And if I can just respond real quick, Mike, and I know it wasn't a specific question, but great comments, and I want to acknowledge, Donna, everything that you said, and I hear you. I understand, being from the city, the role that CACs played and continue to play in community engagement. But I want to be very clear on what we talked about at the beginning of the presentation. The scope of this office looks at organizational community engagement across all city departments. So that's rezoning, as you all know, is housed in planning and development services. But we're also responsible for looking at how the Office of Sustainability is engaging, how Raleigh Water is engaging in all city departments in a standardized way that is equitable. And any community advocate, organizer, or leader, right, understands the difference in a community group and in a government agency. So I would just challenge you all to understand that, you know, the work that we're doing, or the focus of our work is not to recreate what it is that you currently do or used to do, but to work with you in the work that you're doing in a way that gets us towards a greater goal together.
Right, and that was why I said the CACs were just one piece of the pie, but
Yeah.
they were a very effective piece of the pie, and it's a great loss, especially to those communities, which are primarily in the Black communities, that no longer meet.
Well, to a perfect segue, Donna, Ulysses Lane, you have your hand up and you've been a leader of a CAC in a historically African-American part of town, I believe. So
Yes.
Dr. Lane, how you doing tonight?
Good. Very good. How you doing? How's
I'm
everything?
okay.
It's so much in this area that we could talk about, but you know, I have a few things that you could respond to and a few things that I can say because of this pandemic is one thing that we've learned because of this time that we've been given to reevaluate is to pivot and change. And so this was an opportunity to look at some of this that's going on. But something else that we lost during this pandemic that we have to get back is relationships. And so in this citizen engagement, developing these relationships again, it sounds like what you're trying to do and what we all have to do because we have so much competition for people now because of the economy and health and everything else that's going on. But a couple of things I want to mention is that this citizen engagement has to be built on trust and transparency. That has been the big issue with communities of getting a good trust and transparency from our leadership. We've asked for a champion. We've had a few champions on the city council, but we need a champion for citizen engagement. Your office may be that champion, but we know with the politics and trust and transparency, it can stifle engagement because if people don't see any change or results, they don't bother to participate, just like voting. You know, so that is something that we'll have to build to get back. We can talk about what we've done, and we need to talk about now what we're going to do. I spent 2 years thinking about it, and there's some good creative ideas that you have, and dealing with grassroots organizations, whether they be a CAC or not, to be able to reach the people again, because people are suffering. People want to know, what did you do for me? You know, I like the educational aspects that you've included. I like the volunteer aspects that you've included because you will not be able to do this yourself. You got to have the budget and you got to have the resources and the staff. You got to have the community to assist you. We are the only ones that can really reach our community. So these volunteers, grassroots organization partnerships that I've been hearing about are going to be the type of things that we're going to have to do because they're going to have to know us in order for us all to work together. So, you know, and then the other thing you can just mention, how do you measure success in community engagement? So we have all these things, how are we going to measure that? So, you know, you can comment on that as you please, but that's
thank you for that. I agree and understand and fully aware that this work can't get done without community groups. I had slides after each goal that laid out the measurements for each of them, but I was trying to condense it. But I can share that instead of going through each of them. But we do have measurements for each of those 4 goals that we laid out, and I can provide that to you. It wasn't included tonight because there was so much to talk about, but we do have that information, and I can do I share it with Mike, with you, Mike, or Marcia, and you get it back out, or?
sure.
Okay.
I'm going to do a question from the chat. This was one that was posed earlier on, and then it seemed like it was answered, but I still think it's a worthwhile question. Who appoints members of the Community Engagement Board? And I believe that you understand when you kind of answered that question when the City Council is appointing members from each of their districts. But then people are applying, and then those people will be appointed. And who makes that appointment decision from the applicants of average residents in those different categories that you described with whatever their unique life experiences was? Who makes the decision on whether they get on the board or not?
Yeah, so just one point of clarity. When the interest forms become available on May 23rd, they're all in one applicant pool, if you will. And the Office of Community Engagement, so that's me and my colleague, select the community representatives based on long-term Raleigh resident, renter, young adult, et cetera, And then council selects their individuals just based off the criteria that we provided them. Someone that's passionate about community engagement, solution oriented, et cetera. So it's our office and council.
Okay, so maybe I misunderstood. So the application process you're describing will also create the potential pool of board members that the city council will select from as well.
Correct.
So you're kind of pre-vetting them and making sure they have the various criteria and then submitting that to city council for half of the board members. And then the other half are selected by your office?
Almost. So interest forms are submitted into a pool. Our office and council members, so the district council members they'll be able to, they have to look for people in their district, but we're all looking from the same pool of applicants. So once those interest forms open on May 23rd, they close on June 10th, and both our office and council is looking at the same applicant pool.
Okay.
Does that answer the question?
That makes it much clearer for me, at least. I don't know about other folks. I had a different impression based on what I'd heard earlier. So that's great. Steve, you've had your hand up for quite a while.
That's fine.
Steve, thank you for planning a bake sale with me.
Well, thank you for being here. I have a really simple question. I'm not going to question your originality, but I'm sure that this whole concept for this process is probably based on some successful models that you've seen out there, or at least I hope so. So, could you talk about how you came up with the model and where it may have been successful in other locations?
Yeah, great question. So a couple of different responses for it. One, as a social scientist myself, right, we understand that this type of social work cannot be done without the input, direction, suggestion of an external group. So two people in this office can't decide, right, what community engagement looks like for an organization. This was also a part of the conversations and feedback that was received from community members, from reports. There have been a couple of other of states that have community engagement boards, but in North Carolina, I was not able to identify them. Other offices in North Carolina, other cities in North Carolina have like offices of community engagement, but without the external advisory group guiding this work. And so me in a sound mind and just as a trained social worker knows that in order to carry this work forward, it has to be done in collaboration, both with community groups and with an advisory board working towards the same goal.
Great, thanks so much.
Okay, here's a question from the chat. Where was the community engagement that went into this community engagement plan that is already approved by the city council? Do I need to read that? Let me read that again.
Yeah, if you could, I was trying to find it, but it's a lot.
There's some repetition there that makes it kind of hard to follow. Where was the community engagement that went into this community engagement plan that is already approved by the city council? So
I think they're talking about community engagement plan, meaning the goals that I talked about on the slide. If so, correct me. But I started this job in September. So from September, October, November, December, January, February, March. So there were 7 months of essentially not only research, that's not the right word to say, but 7 months of conversations with individuals from the community, those who sat on Mickey Fern's task force, those who were members of CACs and community groups, of me just trying to understand what the problem is. And that information, those concerns, that input was how those goals were designed. I will say that when it comes to, staff capacity, that was something that I identified just being a City of Raleigh employee and seeing where the gaps were. But everything else that you saw came from those 7 months of having conversations with individuals, groups, reading previous reports, just historical knowledge, being from the community and being able to incorporate that as well. And that's how that plan was created. If they're not talking about the office goals, I need some more clarity on the question.
Right. So, I mean, and I think we'll get to that. So what you're saying is there's been a lot of groundwork laid from Mickey Fern's contract to your community outreach. And based on that, that informed what you were doing in setting up this structure. Is that a way to say it?
Not just, yes, Mickey Fern definitely, but other, community groups, organizations, people, city staff, what different members of council wanted to see. Again, we are a council manager form of government. So everything was taken into consideration and developed in a way that just laid out those 4 goals for the office.
Right. And since you came on board, you met last fall, and I don't know if you went into this year with any CAC who asked you to come and speak with them.
We've met with over 45 community groups since we started.
So,
go ahead. Oh, I was just saying that those goals that I talked about today, that's just for this fiscal year. Like once we get the board in place and we continue to move, hopefully our office grows, that'll change or expand too, but that's just where we're starting.
Okay. Stephanie, you have a question or a comment?
Yeah. So I'm not feeling or understanding that even strategically, like that you and the office polled anybody to even figure out what effective community engagement really feels like or looks like, and when the municipal government has an influence on who gets to serve in the community engagement arena, it's very disenfranchising. And what I'm not understanding, and this seems to be the big pink elephant in the room, how do we effectively, because the gentleman who spoke about trust and integrity and transparency, if people do not trust the folks who create the community engagement board, they're not going to trust that anything that the community actually cares about is going to be implemented or listened to. So I don't really know how you're going to get around all of that, but to bring back the CACs, with all due respect, is the simplest solution. It could be done overnight. And so the resistance to the municipal government doing that, I don't know, but whoever's creating this community engagement is not hearing what the people want.
So Stephanie, let me ask you a question. You said that the community was not polled. How do you define a poll?
Okay, so thank you for asking. So had you posted and mailed out to all the citizens, whether they're homeowners or however you decided to do it, and ask them, what are the top 3 gripes, or what are the most pressing issues of concern for you about that is missing in city engagement and community engagement? And you had gathered all those answers and then said, okay, this is what really matters to the city, so this is what we're going to do. I think that would have been a really effective way to do things. I didn't get anything about anything. And wait a minute, and let me just say this. The only way that I found out even about this meeting is because I regularly attend our community association meetings. Otherwise, because I spoke to folks on the street about what was happening tonight, they were like, We had no idea. We have no idea. They're doing things. We have no idea, and what happens is the only way people are getting information about what the city is up to, whether it's zoning, whether it's developments, whether it's whatever it is through the grapevine. It's not through any kind of direct information distribution. And I don't want to take up the forum because a lot of people have questions,
Right.
but I don't think I am speaking about anything that half of the folks on this forum don't have concerns about.
And I thank you for your comment, Stephanie. I do think that is a approach of many. And it's still an approach that can be incorporated of the work that not only this office does, but that the board does. So and that, yes, there are many approaches that could have been taken, and I did what I had the capacity to do and thought was the best steps to get us started. And in regard to your comment about bringing back CACs, be very clear. That's not something that me or my office has the authority to do. So I just want to put that out there so that nobody on this call leaves thinking that it's.
But
it's
you
something
have
that-
the authority to
Stephanie, I
recommend
wasn't
it.
finished. Let me finish talking.
Okay.
Please, I'll let you finish.
Yes, you
I
did.
was-
I
I was-
apologize. I thought you were done.
So I just wanted to make that clarifying point. Go ahead.
Okay, Steph, I mean, I'm mindful of our time here. We're at almost at 8:15. I'm going to condense a couple questions from the chat or observations, and then Bob Gary's got his hand up. A couple of comments in here were concerns about the timing and all this. We've seen the timeline today for setting up this new board, and the questions, I think we might be conflating two issues. One thing is the board, the other thing is what kind of community groups might be created in the future, whatever we call them. But I think in this, a lot of folks in the meeting tonight, I think what we're all desperate for and wanting is some sort of official city relationship with community groups like what the CACs were, whatever they may be, whatever we care to call them. And so the questions that are being asked are, what can be done to improve community engagement now? Even as this board and all this process is playing out, are there any mechanisms that your office, and it's only two of you, so I know you've got to work through all the city staff. And I'll point out, when we were talking about that earlier and people were talking about how much money was being spent on CACs in the past, I asked city council for a number on that and nobody could give it to me. It is more, there was staff time, and I would assume, because nobody was fired, that within the city of Raleigh government, you've got other employees that have a cultural knowledge of what was done in the past that I would imagine you can tap into to see how you do things. But I think the impatience right now is, it seems like, and this has nothing to do with your situation since you came on board, but we're over 2 years out without a replacement, and it seems like we're going to be another almost a year before there's something new in place.
Yeah, I think I understand the question correctly, and I guess where I have a tad bit of hesitation is just that word replace, and that being the expectation that our office can do work that community organizations currently are used to do. So I talked about our scope, I talked about our responsibilities, and that does not include functioning or replacing the work that you all are already doing. So help me understand the question, Mike, because
I think people are wondering why the city can't implement something that creates an official connection between community groups. Like the CACs are no longer supported by the city.
right.
But as I've told you, I get city staff to participate with this, but it's us being proactive.
Yeah.
In the past, city staff was proactive, and that's now missing. And I think people are concerned that kind of proactive behavior on the part of City of Raleigh employees is going to still be missing for at least another year potentially, as the board gets assembled.
My apologies. Can you describe what that formal relationship, what that would look like? That would help me a little bit.
I can, and some others in here who like Donna, who I'm the new chair of the Hillsborough Wade CAC as of just this past summer. But from what I recall, like some city staff, and I don't know what departments they were in, they may do a publication or a flyer that went out as a PDF that would be talking about CAC activity. And of course, all that went away. That would be an example. I think, I guess it was Steph was saying how she finds out about things. We used to get city staff basically promoted the community engagement groups. And that's also missing now. So there's kind of like, we have, in fact, I mean, I shouldn't go on too much, but I want to get to Bob's question. But I remember when they made this vote, Corey Branch, I could hear say something about nature does not like a void, and we've created a void. And then Councilor Martin said, well, we'll fill that void by being the hardest working city council ever. And of course, you know, he left after a scandal. And but that there has not been, nothing has filled the void that was created over 2 years ago. And I think people are very appreciative, I think, of what you're proposing and what you're doing. And you're building out a structure, but also there's a fear that it's a bureaucracy and it's not a grassroots thing, but it's rather from the top down. And then there's just that missing component of engagement. And I think for a lot of us, it seems like a mystery about why would that take so long? So.
Yeah, so I talked in my presentation about what I'm tentatively calling publishing our partners. And so that's when we can have all community groups and organizations published on the city website in one place that has contact information, talks about the kind of work that they do, where they're located, so that city departments can one, find those organizations, coordinate, share information with them, but then also as a resource for new organizations to sign up and be published on the website. As far as publishing the activity of these of community groups, that's something we just have to look into. I mean, right now, just in full disclosure, I don't have the capacity to go online and individually list every single thing that's going on outside of city-related events. But that's not, when you said, if that's what you mean by publication of community groups or community activities, community happenings, that's something that we can look into. I just need to figure out logistically how to make it happen.
Okay. Yeah, and again, you're a two-person office, but obviously there are a lot of city staff who have that kind of experience. Here's a much simpler question. Does City Council have final approval over all 16 members of the board?
State law requires that, yes. So 8 people are selected by our office. Eight people are selected by council and the mayor. They are put together and they just appoint those 16 people. So their final step in making a board formal comes from an appointment process by state law. So the going through the interest forms and finding out who meets what category, and if that group is diverse, that's all done by me and my colleague. The individual council members select or nominate their people, and then council has to give a final appointment for it to be put in place. Yes.
Okay. Bob, if you're still there, your hand's up. Sorry to take a while to get to you. Bob Gary? I'll come back to him.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yep.
So I was the one who asked the question, where was the community engagement that preceded the decision by the city council yesterday to create this board? In a smooth function and a well-functioning local government, there would have been a city council committee that met and heard the presentation that Taisha gave, and it's a good presentation. And then citizens would have been allowed to say, well, here are the strengths of that proposal, and here are the weaknesses that we see, and council members would have responded. And I don't think the outcome would have been exactly what we have in front of us. Ordinarily, public processes change outcomes. But with my question was, what citizen engagement process preceded council's vote yesterday? Because as far as I know, Taisha participated as best she could in a public outreach process, as she described earlier, but it was not a citizen engagement process where people could come together in a room and talk to each other, as well as to her, as well as to council. And that is the problem that we are facing in city government. We have a part-time council that really doesn't care to listen to citizens. And the CACs filled a void that was created by that system. And now that the CACs don't have any relationship to the council, and that's by the council's choice, not by ours, we are not heard by our city council. Our city council hears from important people who will probably be on the community engagement board. And I'm sure Taisha will try her best to get ordinary folks on that board. But I suspect that she'll choose 8 people, and those 8 people will not be the final selections. For example, Taisha, I can tell you that if you choose me, Mary Ann Baldwin will not appoint me. So don't pick me. But I'd be pretty good at it, and Donna would be pretty good at it. And the people who really attempt to represent community interests, I don't think this council wants them on that board. That's my comment.
Okay,
And
thanks,
I
Bob. Sorry, Tisha, go ahead.
No, it's okay, Mike. Just if I can respond to that, I can't speak to any action of an elected official because I'm not an elected official. What I can say is that what went to council yesterday came from conversations from community members and community groups. I heard Taisha, I understand that the council is unlikely to go in this direction. And if you want to work with what we can, we need to see people who are renting. We need to see people who haven't served on a board of commission before. We need to see minority business owners. We need to see people who are actually from Raleigh and know Raleigh. And so that was one part of it too, is that it went to council in February as a draft and a proposed plan, and it went to their retreat, I think in March. Before it was final, it was also shared with community groups. I won't call y'all out, but there are people on this call that I had conversations with, and people not on this call that I had conversations with, just pitching it around. So I take a little bit offense to that, and I'm sure that wasn't your intention, but I didn't just sit in my office and throw noodles at the wall and saw what stuck and prepared it.
Taisha, my criticism is not of you. And yes, I'm sure I know you have reached out to many community groups, but the problem is that the city council has not reached out to community groups. And before they adopted this plan that you presented, they should have vetted it in public and heard from community groups and from interested citizens what the strengths and weaknesses were and are of your plan. I think you just said that there were some things you were told you couldn't do. Well, that's your direction, but we don't have to live with that. And we can go to city council and tell them that's not a good direction to give this office. But city council has given us zero opportunity to comment on this structure. And if we did comment on it, I think we would have heard the kinds of things that are being said tonight, that this board can perhaps function as a facilitator for better community engagement in the future. But given the process by which it's being adopted, I think it's being set up as a bureaucratic roadblock to citizen engagement that would be genuine. And I'm not criticizing you. I am criticizing council.
Okay, guys, Taisha has a commitment after this. We're approaching 8:30. We want to do a wrap up. Bob, that you made a lot of great points, but Taisha, if you have the time or want to make the time right now, if you want to respond to any of Bob's comments before we turn it over to Susan, it's up to you.
No, you can turn it over to Susan. I was trying to skim through the chat, but go
Yeah,
ahead.
okay. And thank you for that, Tisha. There are a lot of interesting questions and comments in the chat that I did not get to, but we're out of time. And like I said, Tisha has another commitment and we wanted, I'm going to turn it back over to Susan to do a wrap up. And thank you, Taisha. It was very good.
Thank you very, very much for participating in tonight's community conversation. I think it was truly that, a community conversation, and that's a start. We all have bigger dreams and aspirations for community engagement, and Taisha has really been a good sport in fielding all these various questions, but I am sure she feels the frustration for people who have given so many years of their lives in volunteer work for this city. And it's very hard to be shut out. And that's what you're hearing tonight, Taisha. We have some really great questions and comments in chat. I'd like to figure out a way to pass these along to you. So Steph or I will be in touch with you or Marcia Stickford, and we'll make sure you get them, because if nothing else, you need to be aware of what people on this end are thinking. They're concerned because they love the city. They're concerned because they love their neighborhoods. And everybody wants you to be successful. This is not a personal thing for you. They're just darn concerned that we can't seem to penetrate that wall of resistance from this city council and mayor. I'm going to close right now and just remind everybody that if you are not already on the Livable Raleigh email list, you should get on it so you can be informed about what's going on in the city. It's very hard to find that information out anywhere but in our weekly mailing, unless you want to spend all afternoon on the city website. We have also, we're 501c4. We love donations. If anybody feels so inclined, please go to our website and you can donate directly off of that. I also wanted to say one other thing while we've got a whole bunch of people here. We are in the contest that Indie Week is running annually called the Best Of. Last year we won the Best Activist Local Group. We would love to win again. So if you are so inclined tonight, go to the Livable Raleigh website and just click on the Indie Week icon and you'll be able to vote directly, or go to the Indie Week site and go to the local color section. That's the section that our category is in. If you feel that we have provided a good community engagement experience for you, I really want to thank you very, very much for being here. If you have any questions and ways that we can improve upon this, please let us know. Thank you again, Taisha, for being a wonderful example of a new member of management in the city. And you can always reach out to us and ask us for any of our opinions on anything. We're just a shy group of people that don't have much to say, right? Thank you, Mike, for being a great host. And everybody have a wonderful evening. Thank you very much.